Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I am so excited to be here again, and I really want to take this opportunity to talk about the Bad Bunny concert. Of course, I couldn't not talk about it, and I'm going to try really hard not to ramble because I have so many things going through my mind that I've been thinking about these past couple of days, watching all of the incredible interpretations and explanations of all of the historical, cultural, and political references of the show. Bad Bunny is just so incredible. That whole intentionality that it took to create something like this that was so meaningful, impactful, respectful, and full of love was just beyond my expectations. I mean, I knew it was going to be a good show. I didn't even know there was a Super Bowl going on, to be honest. We were calling it Benito Bowl like everybody else, but just what he presented and the love that it infused in our community, in so many communities, is just, it's palpable. And I have seen a couple of comments about why was it all in Spanish and other crazy not useful information and commentary around the show. And honestly, all of those comments are just straight up laughable. They're so ridiculous. And I mean, it doesn't, especially because all of the love and energy that's coming out of our communities right now, because we feel so seen and so united and so heard, so understood, just historically and culturally, that it is a huge energy force that you can't even penetrate with all of your negative comments. So I see some of these comments and I'm like, just plain ridiculous. And I feel sorry for you for feeling that, because you can be on this train where all of us are feeling loved and happy and excited and like one people, one united continent, or you can be on the other side of all this little small population of people just speaking straight nonsense. It's laughable. And I feel sorry for them, honestly. Bad Bunny did a great job of just trying to kill all of that hatred with love. And I think it worked, because all of the hate that I've seen coming out, it has so much less power because of all of the love that we're all feeling. So just wanted to throw that out there. But I mean, incredible. But here's what it's making me think about, because today I'm a very different person standing in my Latinidad. I wasn't always sure of who I was. And I won't say I wasn't proud of who I was. I just didn't understand where I came from. So it was really tough for me to understand my own identity. And now, as a woman looking back at my adolescence and youth and how I felt about being a Latina woman and the lack of information, the lack of feeling I had around it, is really interesting to look at what I've grown into, and then raising children at this age and what their lens is around cultural identity. So just a little backstory about me. When I was younger, I did not speak Spanish at all, actually. I was like, on one side of my family, I'm third generation. On the other side of my family, I'm fourth generation. Like, our family has been here a really long time. And so Spanish was something that I think my family really, just over the generation, it was better for us to be predominantly English speaking for many reasons. But one of them was safety. One of them was access. One was education. Some of the reasons were socioeconomic. And our families tended to believe that it was better for us to do away with our native language and to assimilate in order to reach the levels of economic achievement that our families came here for in the first place. And so our language was one of the first things to go. My parents speak Spanish, but I did not grow up speaking Spanish at all. I only spoke English. And so when I went to elementary school, middle school, high school, there actually weren't a lot of people that looked like me. I went to a predominantly white and Asian schools, and the Latinos that were there were either immigrants themselves or first generation, and they spoke fluent Spanish and in some cases didn't speak English. What was interesting, though, is that when I was in maybe second or third grade, I remember being put into the ESL classroom. I think I was behind on my reading skills, perhaps, at that point, and they thought, well, maybe it's because she doesn't speak English. And it wasn't true, because I didn't speak Spanish at all. And I remember that being not a great experience. It actually felt quite negative at the time, because I was put in other people that didn't speak English, and we couldn't communicate with one another, and we weren't given a whole lot of resources or attention. So it felt more like a holding pattern while everyone else studies books and reads that were more proficient than we were. Then I remember going to high school, and again, I felt like there weren't any people that I could identify with because the Latinos that were there, they either spoke Spanish or they didn't speak much English. And so I felt like there was a cultural disconnect because so much culture had been stripped away in the name of trying to make sure that our family got ahead in life. So I didn't know quite what to do with myself or like even what to call myself. And in fact, I didn't know. So my mom is from El Salvador, her family, and my dad's family is from Mexico. And I didn't know that about myself. All I knew was that I was a brown girl who didn't speak Spanish and wasn't like the other brown kids. And it felt very isolating. So when I got to high school, I still didn't feel like I was rooted in my Latina community because I didn't speak the language. And honestly, I don't remember that ever being something I was called out on. I don't have a memory of an experience that particularly made me feel like I didn't have license to call myself Latina. It was something that I just knew inside that I imposed on myself, that because I didn't speak Spanish, I wasn't Latina enough to be a part of these spaces. And who knows where that messaging really came from. I'd have to like really go back and sort through all my memories, but definitely there was a feeling there that someone could be Latina but not Latina enough. And that's how I felt. So I decided that, well, I don't want anyone to know that I don't speak Spanish. I don't want to be called out on it. God forbid. It felt like it was going to be like the end of the world if anyone ever asked me to speak Spanish and I didn't. So instead I hid. And I remember saying, well, maybe I'll just call myself Hawaiian because there's plenty of people that I know that are Hawaiian here that don't speak the language. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And for a while, I would say at least a year, I would tell people like, oh, I'm from Hawaii. Like that's where I'm from. That's why I'm so brown, because everybody saw this little brown girl but couldn't understand why I didn't speak Spanish. So I just made it easy on them and said, and myself, and said, well, maybe I'll just say I'm Hawaiian. Looking back at that experience, I think a couple things. We didn't really talk a lot about culture and cultural significance in my family. And I think, again, there was just a lot feelings rooted in survival and getting ahead, and because that's what we came here for. And so it didn't really take a front seat. It was not the backdrop on which I was raised. However, there were things that were different about my family that just were, and we didn't talk about. We had tortillas all the time. There was never a moment where we didn't have arroz and frijoles in the fridge. We listened to corridos. We listened to Linda Ronstadt. And actually, that is where the turning point was for me. Linda Ronstadt and Selena were two of my biggest idols, because I knew that they were Latina. And actually, I get a little choked up thinking about this. But I knew they were Latina and didn't speak Spanish. So I felt for the first time seen and heard like, oh, wow, two women like me who don't speak the language but call themselves Latinas. And not only that, they have the audacity to sing in a language that they didn't really know as their own. I don't know if they didn't know it was their own, but I didn't feel like it was my own. So I spent so much time, my sister and I spent a lot of time learning those songs, singing every single lyric, and that really kickstarted me into having a desire to learn more about my culture and to learn how to speak Spanish. The one thing I will say, though, is despite how I felt about being Latina, as much as I felt disconnected from my own community, I always inside felt a calling toward my heritage. And I remember the first time my family and I went to Mexico, I felt so rooted and grounded. And I felt like this is where I belong. Even though now I was this United States girl coming into Mexico who didn't speak Spanish. And I still felt there was something pulling me there and calling me there, that it felt like it was home. So interesting, because I think about this Bad Bunny concert and I think about everything that he shed light on, and it brings me back to all of the things that my family, my ancestors lost as part of coming to this country and trying to be a part of the United States. And I think about the identity that was told they didn't belong to, which is Americanos, being stripped away from their own identity when they've always been Americanos all along, coming from the Americas, but told that they weren't, and trying so hard to be Americano by way of stripping away their culture. The turning point for me in high school was when I decided to change school. So I went from one school where it was predominantly Asian and white to another school that was just up the street. It was another high school. And I begged my parents to go there because I had two friends that went there. And it was a very heavy Latino population. I joined a folklorico group and learned how to dance ballet folklorico mexicano. And in that right there is where I could feel myself coming back to my roots. I'm pretty proficient and fluent in Spanish now, today, like some 20 years later, because I really put an effort to learn the language. But I'm telling you, like, I was 17 and I birthed 17, I only spoke English. Like, I spoke very little Spanish, but I had this really strong feeling that I needed to bring my culture back by way of language. Now, that's not the only way to bring culture back in the home. And in fact, if you look at my life and my upbringing, you'll see there's the presence of our heritage throughout my entire life. And my mom always says, Elena's the one that brought the culture back into the house, because none of my siblings spoke Spanish, or they still don't speak Spanish. But that's not quite true, because the culture was always, always there. The absence of our native language in our home did not mean we weren't Latino, and did not mean we didn't have culture. Because like I said, there were always things about our family that were innately Latino that you could not have taken away, and just became part of our lifestyle and the way we lived. And it's everything from the foods that we ate to the way our parents raised us, the values that we had, the things that we learned about life. Those all come from Latino values, from our raíces, from our ancestors, from where we came from. That's not stuff that you can just pick up and learn by reading on a page. Yes, I did bring language back into the house, and my siblings are probably better now than they were before, because they have an interest in learning how to speak Spanish. But that's not what brought the culture back. The culture was always there. It never went away. It just took me a little bit longer to understand that I was Latina despite not having to speak the language. And what really helped me feel connected was to learn the language. And it's something that my husband and I felt was very important for our children. So my kids, in their very early days of life, they spoke just Spanish. Now they're speaking English mostly. However, their Spanish is way better than my Spanish was at their age. So I feel super proud of that accomplishment, of having to bring something back from our past back into our present, because it's something that we've always had. It's something that was stripped of us when we came here. We were told the lie that we weren't Americanos unless we dropped our culture and our language, and then we can be Americanos, when in fact we've always been from the Americas. It's never been something that's been gone. Just like I've always been Latina, it's never been something that was gone. But because I was stripped of so many things, I felt that lack of connection until I came back to my roots and learned to speak Spanish. But more important than bringing back language for our children is that we brought back a sense of curiosity about where we came from, a sense of curiosity to know where our roots are from, to know our heritage, to know our culture, to know more people that look like us, to hear diverse stories about our communities. And I see it happening with my sons now. One of my sons in particular is really starting to think about what it means to be in a diverse space. He's really feeling this calling to be in spaces where he sees people that look like him, and he sees people that have different experiences, not just one experience. He's really starting to think about what it means to make change in these spaces, and what our history has taught us about what it means for us to be here. And it's so beautiful, because as much as I think in the past I felt embarrassment to talk about that time in my life where I didn't know who I was, and I was questioning my identity and hiding who I really was, I find that that experience has really helped to inform how I look at my identity now and how I'm helping my children to understand who they are as people. So I almost didn't want to share that story today, honestly, because I was like, how ridiculous, how ridiculous was I? But it's so important, right? Because we do sometimes have a lack of identity of who we are, even just cultural things aside. Even just as a mother, I feel like, we tend to lose our identity and lose ourselves and try to wonder, like, who am I actually? What am I actually doing? And just trying to figure ourselves out. I am still learning things about who I am and who I want to be, who I aspire to be, the things I want to do. But one thing I never want to forget is where I came from, because I feel like when we understand our history, when we understand what's been taken from us, we can rediscover who we really are, and we can shed all of these ideas of who people are trying to tell us that we are. I think that was what was so surprising for so many people that don't understand our Latino culture is how all of these things that have transpired in our history, things that were beautiful and things that were challenging and unfavorable, have only served to strengthen us as a community. So that me not having a real strong sense of who I was because of what was taken from my family in the past has only served to make my family stronger. It's part of the bricks that I'm standing on to build the foundation of our family, to help them understand who they are, to help them continue to be curious about our history and where we come from. Because only then, when we understand those raíces, when we understand where we are, where we've been, can we really begin to understand who we are as people. It's so beautiful and I love it so much. That's my 2 cents about the Bad Bunny concert and what it meant for me and my family and our sense of identity and who we are and the pride that we carry with us today about where we've been in our history. It was just so impactful. And my hope is that concert, that understanding planted a seed of curiosity of where you come from, where your raíces, who your neighbor is, where your neighbor comes from, so that we can understand that we are all in this together, that we are all united through our mutual stories, through our diversities, through our common similarities. We are all connected through those things. Stories are so important. My hope is that also you'll continue to talk about your story, to share your story, share it with your family, share it with your children, share it on a podcast, talk about where you came from. It's important for you to say that story so that we can understand one another better by understanding all of our histories. We can only get stronger by knowing each other's stories. We can only become more connected by understanding our histories and being curious about one another. It was a beautiful show. It made me feel so much pride, and I'm going to continue riding this wave for as long as possible. I truly believe that unity that we all felt, that we're all still feeling, is what is going to bring us to a place of peace and understanding and combating all of the hatred that's coming our way. No matter all of the negative things that have been happening, I don't know if there's any Latinos that I know that didn't feel an immense sense of pride for who we are and where we come from. I feel super proud of us as a community, and all of you that have posted information about your interpretation of the concert and what it means to you. Let's keep sharing our stories because they're so important to get them out loud, to talk about where we've been. I feel really proud to be here talking to you about this as a Latina woman. I feel really proud to call myself a Latina woman and to be raising Latino children in this time. Thank you so much for being here, and until next time, adios.